You're very welcome, everyone. Today's webinar is Meaningful and Manageable. So meaningful and manageable, supporting students to gather evidence of their learning in physical education. And this follows on from our recent webinar, which was regarding supporting student goal setting and reflection. So these two webinars are very much linked, and it's all about allowing the student to gather evidence, to take responsibility of for their own learning in physical education. So you're all extremely welcome. Michael Carey is my name. I'm a physical education teacher in Glanmire Community College, but I have been seconded to Junior Cycle for Teachers for the last number of years. And I'm delighted to be here with you today. I would prefer to be in person, but I think it's great that we can have so many teachers from all corners of the country coming through. I'm supported, I call it the Cavan Call Centre. Anya Farrelly is here with me as well this evening. And Anya will be looking after the questions as they come in and just facilitating the chat as well. So we will be joined a small bit later by Mary Nealon in Ardgillan Community College, Fabienne Cooney in Coláiste, Chláir, Doireann ní Mhuimhneacháin in Coláiste, Choilm, Ballincollig. We also have a CPD booklet. It's about 22 pages, but there's some lovely examples of how students are gathering evidence from two further teachers from tonight's webinar as well. So I think Anya is adding that and various times there to our chat. So you can access that booklet via the chat function. We have a Padlet, and I might ask Anya to drop in that Padlet. I might actually bring it across myself here. Our Padlet is, our Padlet is just here. Hopefully you can all see that on my shared screen. So basically we'll be interacting with this Padlet, and Mary, Fabienne and Doireann have already added some resources that they find useful in the context of their presentations as we progress. Okay, so I hope everybody can hear me well, and I hope everybody can see the screen, and we're going to kick on. Just a small bit of we're going to look to learning intentions first of all, and then we'll look to our bit of housekeeping. Three things we're going to do over the space of the next hour. They are explore the key documents that support the current return to school. We've been here before. We were here last September, October, and there's some key documents and key updates that I'd like to bring your attention to. We're going to examine briefly the arrangements for assessment and reporting on the learning of our current third year cohort. Okay, we'll look to that in more detail. The junior cycle profile of achievement won't issue. So how can we meaningfully report on the learning in PE of that current third year cohort? And I think the last one is the bit that I'm looking forward to. We're going to hear, we're going to share, and we're going to explore approaches to gathering evidence of learning that's meaningful and manageable. Okay, so that is really where we're going to hand over to our three teachers that have kindly offered to come on board this evening. One or two updates, and I'll be very brief. We had a wonderful CPD event, well attended by teachers, and the feedback was very positive. I want to thank you for your engagement in it. Engaging in a full day workshop is a challenge, and the feedback that we received, and the anecdotal and the written feedback we received, is very positive. For any school that hasn't accessed that, there's a number of ways in the upcoming school year that you can do so. First of all, some schools that didn't close for the cluster event this year will be facilitated, but of course there's always the option to attend it via second subject CPD as well. And it's likely, I think in the context we're currently in, that all of that CPD will be online. So that just gives an overview of the day. So that's our recent CPD workshops, which will be repeated again as we enter the new school year. The work that the NCC are currently undertaking is progressing well. So it's for those that aren't aware, there is a new 135-hour program for physical education at junior cycle being developed, and it's a very welcome development. Consultation is a key feature. There was a phase of consultation previously, and it's quite likely there'll be a further phase of consultation in the coming month or 6 weeks. So full detail of that is available in the support booklet. Given the fact that well-being has changed and evolved over the past years, and seeing as assessment and reporting within well-being is now a key feature of the junior cycle and the junior cycle profile of achievement, the well-being guidelines were recently updated. So they were released at the, I think it was the end of, in mid-March, the Junior Cycle Wellbeing Guidelines were updated, and they're accessible at ncca.ie, but also they're linked in our CPD booklet. So there are 2 updates from the NCCA, the work on the 135-hour program and the work on the wellbeing guidelines. That's just come to completion. We have a new area of the JCT website that I'm very proud to introduce to you tonight. We have got a landing page. So I'm just going to draw across the a quick browser here. And within the homepage for jct.ie, there's 2 ways you can access it. It's through wellbeing here in the icon, or up in the top right-hand corner here, you can navigate to the wellbeing section of jct.ie. And hopefully now my computer will be responsive enough to manage all the various things that are happening. So we've got our wellbeing section, and physical education has its own landing page here. And it is a language page, Asperla Agus Ascoelga. So you can find key documents and supports relating to any CPD workshops you've undertaken, but especially resources relating to planning and assessment. In our Padlet, the first column here has got a direct link to that page, but we welcome any feedback that you might have. Is something missing? Can something further help you? So please feel free to interact with that. I suppose after today's event would be probably the most helpful for you. So we're flying through our updates because there's quite a bit happening. There was the return to school guidance for practical subjects. So this was revised for March, and there's updated and supplementary guidelines for physical education. So that's from page 9 to 12 of that document. And again, it is linked in our support document that I might just ask that Anya posts again in our chat area. So the full link to that is within our CPD booklet for today's event. A further document looking at supporting the well-being of school communities. You know, there's some very specific guidance and some very meaningful guidance that has been developed by the Department of Education here, supporting well-being, looking at staff well-being, linking with parents, and encouraging student voice and agency. And building on that second last point, a document developed by the NCCA earlier this year is exceptionally strong in allowing students to consider what their experience has been and what might be the focus of learning and how it might inform the learning in the classroom in the coming while. So this is the considerations and planning for junior cycle wellbeing for the full academic year. There's P-specific considerations on page 5, and it's an extremely helpful document, both in the times we have at the moment, in these challenging times, but I think in real time also. So I've come to an end of my updates, and I hope that those key documents that are all listed within the CPD booklet are a support as we currently return to school. Okay. I'm going to very briefly examine the arrangements for assessment and reporting on the learning of our current third year student cohort. Okay, so our current third years have had quite a disrupted last 2 years. They've missed the final term pretty much from March onwards of last year. And then of course, they've missed all of the middle term in this school year. So it was deemed appropriate in March that the junior cycle profile of achievement was not appropriate as a reporting and certification mechanism in 2021. And the reason for that was because the state examinations are not taking place this year as they would normally be conducted by the State Examinations Commission. So essentially it's a school report. It doesn't have any external involvement from the SEC this year. So essentially then a school report will suffice. So students and their parents or guardians should receive a written report from the school, and that outlines the progress and achievement within each subject, short course, in some cases priority learning units, but I think key for us is well-being and other areas of learning. So although the JCPA isn't being issued, there really is an onus on us at a school level to provide a meaningful report on how students have progressed and what their achievements might have been within physical education this year. We have quite a lot of support on that previously, because this time last year, similarly, last year's third years were in the same situation. We launched a webinar this time last year, which looked at effective reporting on physical education within wellbeing. And a number of the approaches within that webinar could be very helpful now in supporting you as you plan for assessment and reporting for your current third years, your current second years, your current first years. And especially within that document, page 8 and 9 of our booklet has examples of reporting in physical education. And a number of those, for example, at the top of the second page, reporting on a specific assessment moment, perhaps the use of classroom-based assessment, or allowing students to report through maybe a student-led comment in other areas of well-being or other areas of learning could be quite positive as well. Other aspects there look at, goal setting, reflection as part of your portfolio, and maybe interactions at a parent-teacher meeting or a parent-teacher conference as well. So in the context of reporting on student learning for our current third years, I hope that our previous webinar is of support to you, as well as this webinar here. The final thing that I'm going to look to is a very helpful 2-page document from the department, which is a summary of returning to school guidance for teaching, learning and assessment. So we'll have a quick scan through this. A lot of these we would have looked at in our webinar last October as students return to school. We looked at Hopfall's principles like a sense of safety, a sense of group and self-efficacy, and a sense of hope. So those messages apply again. However, this document gives a guide regarding what our teaching and assessment approaches should be for these final 6 weeks. Okay, we should consider how this stimulates students' interests, motivate them to learn, and support outcomes. Okay, so what would really be interesting for our students this year? We might look at a sample of the things that came up last year in just a minute. Provide a nice collaborative learning experience. Okay, can we allow them to interact? They've been working very much on their own at home over the last 3 to 4 months. Can we allow them now to engage in safe collaborative learning as much as possible, with plenty of peer engagements, perhaps peer feedback, and to build on their opinions and their perceptions? And I think the teaching community have made huge steps with regard to our use of digital technologies. How can we now bring the best of that, the best of what worked when students were learning from home, now back into the classroom? And in terms of assessment, it should reflect the specification and the learning outcomes. So any assessment should be based on the learning outcomes, and we've got to keep a balance of assessments, okay? Because there is only 6 to 7 weeks of term remaining. We've got to keep a balance. And I know a lot of schools and a lot of PE teachers are considering, the classroom-based assessments as a structure to assess and report on student learning. Looking down through this, there's specific support for students with special education needs. Students with special education needs are sometimes those that have a higher risk of suffering from ill-being at this time, due to maybe not understanding the context that we're in. So I think there's some really nice support here and a nice link that can bring to further support for students in that area. So I'm just going to look at, I'm just going to move it forward slightly here. These learning needs were identified when we logged into a webinar last May. And they were the needs of students when they were under the restrictions that we had last year. So as you consider learning that's relevant and meaningful for your students, these could well be the types of learning focus that would be appropriate to that. Okay, and there's a copy of this slide in your CPD booklet as well. The ones that stand out for me, they're working with in restrictions at home. Can they undertake activities that require little equipment? Because for the next week or two, they don't have access to any sporting facilities, for example. Do they know the minimum weekly requirements? Can they consider which activities and movements that they most enjoy, and can they set goals? And I think we'll explore this in the context of the remainder of our discussion as well. The second page of this document, very briefly, looks at digital technologies. So are there ways that we could maximize students' opportunities to use digital technologies, pull things into a portfolio perhaps, share digital recordings or digital reflections, and then use the online learning platform in the school? So can we give consideration now? Have we learned from our experience in the last few weeks and months to actually use digital technologies in a way as students return to school? And then the last thing there is the focus on well-being. Our first years and second years have had a very fragmented experience over the last 2 years. So we've got to consider how the well-being for these groups is best supported. And I actually think the best way would be through meaningful learning experiences and relevant learning experiences just now. Teachers are aware, so we got to allow students as much as possible to progress and flourish for the limited time we have with students in the remainder of the school year. And can we as teachers support students in taking proactive steps to promote their physical well-being, which would impact in their emotional and mental well-being. So looking across these 2 pages, I think there's a strong link and a strong call on PE teachers to really consider what our learning approaches will look like over the coming while. I might ask us now just to interact with our Padlet. So Anya, I'm going to ask you to share the link to that Padlet again if possible. Like, one of the key things that arose in that document was all assessment of student learning should serve a very clear purpose. It should provide formative feedback and be focused on improvement. Okay, so really it should be very meaningful, and it should allow us to support students in the context that they find themselves currently, these unprecedented context. So the question we're posing is, during this last school term, what type of evidence of learning would be meaningful for your students to gather? So my example before we go to it is, you know, they've been off school for the last 3 months. We've engaged in digital learning. Could there be a chance to say what evidence what activities have I found to be most beneficial for me in supporting my physical well-being or in supporting my mental well-being? You know, once we've gathered evidence of that, it could be a very useful thing for students to start to interact with. Okay, so that's one suggestion. And that I feel is learning that would be relevant or meaningful in my school context. So you should be able to access the Padlet there. And we're going to be completing that on column 2 there, on column 2. So hopefully people should be able to access that. Let me just see now. Yeah. And hopefully that will come through live here as well. If anybody is having any difficulties, please just let me know, okay? And our Padlet is shared there via our shared area, okay? Or via our chat, I should say. Great, and I can see some people just beginning to interact with it here now as well. So it's a hard one to consider. What type of evidence learning would be most meaningful for your students to gather this year? So I'll just give that a few minutes there, and we'll look to 1 or 2 of the comments as well. That's great. So I had a worry that it wasn't shared properly there, but thankfully 1 by 1 the stars come out here, and it's some very interesting comments are coming forward. So I love this, what activities they enjoyed most throughout online learning, okay? And if we find out what activities they enjoyed most, could we actually build that in? Although they're back in school, are there aspects we can build in class time or between classes? 1 or 2 people are saying their physical activity levels pre, during, and post school closures. So is there a way to actually track that and maybe have a visual representation of that? So thanks very much to the anonymous person there. Reflection, fitness levels based on where they are now to compared to pre-pandemic. So thanks very much to, I think that might be Anya Woods coming in there, which is great. Creating their own circuits, workouts through the FIT principle and accounting for what worked well for them. Wouldn't that be a lovely focus of learning for the remainder of the school year? Creating their own small circuit or workouts through the FIT principle and accounting for what worked well for them. And there's some lovely sample workouts from Athletics Ireland. I might, when our contributors are coming in, I might just add it to that area a small bit later as well. So thanks very much for that contribution. Evidence of being active independent from peers. So that's being active on their own. So thanks very much for that. I'll scan down randomly maybe for 1 or 2 more. I see a slightly long one here. Reflection on, did they engage in physical activity during remote learning? If so, this is really detailed. If so, what did they do? How did they plan it? How did they keep accountable? what were the challenges they encountered, and what would they do if they had to do it again in future. And as I was reading that, it was writing. So I hope that one's finished so I can move on to the next one. But thanks very much for that contribution, whoever has put it in there. A Murphy, learning log based on their understanding of the theory of physical education and the importance of physical activity probably in their lives and how this incorporated into their weekly activity. And one last one, some of their activities updated in their journals or how they adapted their physical activity routines. And I think one thing that we found during lockdown is that, or during the school closures, is that students that were very reliant on sporting, on maybe structured training sessions or club training sessions or gymnastics club, they found it very difficult because they lacked that structure. And sometimes we found that our students that might be more into their individual exercises flourished because they were used to undertaking activities of that type before. So I'd like to thank you for that. I think looking down through this is very interesting. There were some lovely ideas that came forward, and it's all about the focus of learning, okay? We're not going back to do basketball or soccer. It's very much focused on what is the focus of learning. Just as I saw it here, becoming more competent in using online platforms. So I think that's extremely strong, okay? And it's great to see that GMQ 4 here is actually looking to the next question as well. And we might look to that all together shortly as well. So thanks very much for your engagement in that. I think we've got some really nice ideas from across the teachers here, but we're going to look to more ideas now from our teachers that have kindly offered to come on board today as well, because we're going to share some practices. So as well as giving ideas, it gives specific ways that these teachers will gather evidence of student learning, okay? Because once we have evidence of student learning, we can use that to allow students to reflect on it, but it can also support the type of feedback we give and the judgments that we make on student learning as well. So I'm going to introduce my three teachers here, and I'm delighted that these three teachers could put into preparation over the last week, looking back into their last week of the Easter holidays. Mary, Fabienne and Doireann all prepared this in advance. So I just want to thank them from the outset for the time they've given. And Mary, if you can unmute there and come in, I might call on you just to lead out on your piece here.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Nealon, and I am a PE teacher in Ardgillan Community College in Balbriggan, County Dublin. We're a huge school. We've over 1,000 students. We also have a unit for children with special educational needs. We are a very active school. We have a huge extracurricular programme in operation normally, obviously not through COVID. And we are a pilot school for the Active Flag programme in Limerick. So I'm only one of 6 PE teachers. So on behalf of my colleagues, Owen, Sinead, Katie, Amel and Karen, I'm happy to share one aspect of practice that we used during lockdown. So in January, when we discovered that we were on lockdown again, we decided to look at strand 1, health and physical activity. And this is the first time that we decided to do live classes. So we didn't exactly give much choice to students on this one. What we did was we decided we would work on cardiorespiratory endurance component of fitness. So we undertook the 12-minute Cooper run, and we followed the Athletic Ireland Run for Fun programme. Now, just to say, well-being was a huge factor in us planning what we were going to do. Students were very unmotivated. The sporty ones kind of went off and did their own thing, and the ones that are not in clubs and that found it very, very difficult to get moving and to get active. So we decided to change things around from the last lockdown. So we're a Microsoft school. We used Microsoft Teams to engage students in live classes. We had Edmodo pages set up to send assignments to, and for students to send their work into there. But at the end of the programme, I'm not great with technology, as all my colleagues know. And I just found that the information was going everywhere. Students would send one assignment to Teams, they might send the second one to Edmodo, then assignments were coming in an email. So it was quite difficult to keep track and to gather everything together that they had sent in. So for the second part of lockdown, we decided to stay with Strand 1, and based on student feedback and their reflections from the Run for Fun programme, we gave far more choice to students. We asked them to complete the Activate HSE resource to gauge their attitudes to physical activity, and to also find 3 activities that they liked doing most. And from there, we launched our second Strand 1 programme. Now, our focus was, how can we help our students to gather evidence of learning to one place? So we wanted to try and it would help teachers as well, because at the end of the programme, it's much easier to have a Chláir meeting if all of your information is in the one place. So we looked at Microsoft PowerPoint slides. And before I show you how we did it and how it works, I'll just say that when you set up a set of slides for a class, a link is created to that set of slides. And you just send that link to the students, and they log into it, click on it, and they have access to the slides. So it's actually very easy for them to get into the slides overall. So based on the Activate programme, we decided to divide each class into groups of 6, and we divided them into different colour-coded groups. So the blue group, if your name was on a blue slide, you wrote only on that blue slide. If you're on the green group, you only wrote on the green slide. So you're a little part of a subgroup within the class. But the good thing is, you also had full access to the 24 slides. So you were part of the whole class as well. So students logged on very quickly. Now, some of the slides that we set up, thanks, let's just move in, sorry. The first set of slides that we did was reflecting on my physical activity programme. And that was based on the answers that they gave to the Active 8 booklet. So they had to pick 2 components of fitness that they were going to work on. Everybody, I think, picked cardiorespiratory endurance because we had focused on that one in the first project that we did in the Run for Fun programme. And then they picked a second one, and they also picked 3 activities that they liked to do. Some people came back, students after the Run for Fun programme, and said, look, I just can't run. The very thoughts of going out for a run switches me out. So this one gave them much more choice in what they wanted to do, and a lot more students got engaged. Now, the second slide that we set was, that's the reflection on the programme. So that's where they started off. From there, then, the next slide was my goals for the next 2 weeks. So students had their SMART goals already set out from the Activate programme. So from there, we went and they set we tried to get it as specific as we could. 2 goals for the next 2 weeks that they were to work on. Now, the overall goal was to get students active behind it. For us, the whole thing was to engage them, to get them more positive, to get them their 1-hour activity every day where possible. Throughout the programme, there was great success. We could see students who had done absolutely nothing and were totally switched off and not in good state of mental well-being, shall we say. And they engaged in this programme, and their reflections were super, saying how beneficial it was, how happy they were that they got involved in it. So in that sense, it was a success. Now, on 2 occasions, we set up individual slides for the class. And one of those was, we did a midway reflection, sorry, that's coming up first. Halfway through the programme, we set up another slide for the midway reflection. So And we changed the goals on that for the next 2 weeks. All right, so the midway reflection was just to stop and say, how are you getting on? Are you actually doing what you said you were going to do? And then they tweaked their goals for the next 2 weeks. On 2 occasions, we gave separate individual slides. So you set up a group of 24, there's 24 in all of our classes, 24 slides per class, and you write the student's name on the slide, and that is where they send evidence of their learning to you and evidence that what work they have completed. So apps were used. Some students didn't have access to apps, so they wrote it in their PE copy on a page, and they got a parent's signature on it at the end of the week to show us that it was real and that they did do it. The final reflection we also gave individual slides for, because we kind of felt that the pictures of their journey and the end of program reflection is probably where we're going to be able to make a judgment call on the progress that they've made. They answered all of the questions. This is with third years, and we're hoping to get a comment from them maybe for their report that they're going to get. So we included the questions like the thing that I'm most proud of in completing this, because some of them were really proud of their achievement, and rightly so. And what did you learn from this program? So we have key questions there to just make a judgment call on how they have succeeded in this program. Now, the whole idea of showing those slides is to show the pros mainly, and there are a few cons of using the slides to gather information of student learning into the one place. So for me, definitely, personally, it was a huge success and a great idea, because I didn't have to wade through technology to find everything and where it was gone to. Everything was in the one place, and everything is easily accessed via one link. Now, the other advantage of it was that students could see each other's slides, and I hadn't realized just how motivating this was for student learning. Nobody wanted to have their slide blank when all the slides in the class were being filled in. Students were extremely helpful to each other. We'd have a live class every week, and we'd discuss what was happening and how people were getting on, and we'd have a look at the slides. A big advantage to that is when we were given feedback during class, it was very easy for the students to change their slide there and then. It wasn't that, oh, I've got this wrong, now what do I do? We say, okay, you misunderstood that, go back in and change it. So by the end of the class, their slide was up to date before they went on to do the next week's work. We felt that there was a great sense of belonging and learning together as the group. Even though you're in a little small group of 6, you were part of the whole 24 class group. So all students progressed together with their learning. Now, there's 1 or 2 little cons to it. Probably it does take time to set them up, but anyone that's good with technology, it wouldn't take you half as long as what it took me. So I would highly recommend giving it a go. You just set up a new link for each class every week. So you have the template, to use the template, and they write up on each one each week. The main problem was slides couldn't be accessed easily by phones, and a lot of our students were using phones. So this was causing a little bit of stress. So what I ended up doing was, we said, right, we have to help them out. You send the stuff to Edmodo to me, and I will write on your slide. Or in class, they would tell me what they had written in their copy, and I would type it up there and then for them. Now, it was just not to have any students stressed, because they unfortunately had to use just a phone. One problem that could arise. It didn't arise in our school because we had a little chat before we put the slides up. Every student has access to every student's slide within their class. So you could have somebody messing about with another person's slide. But at the beginning, we just said, look, we're setting these up. We trust you fully. I know there's going to be no nonsense. If there's anybody goes in and writes on somebody else's slide, the teacher who has set it up can have access to who has interfered with the slide. So it can be sorted, but I just would give the heads up to say at the start, you only write on your own slide and you don't go near anybody else's. Overall, I would say that the slides were a huge success in gathering student learning into one place. It's just so easy to keep track as you're going along. Flick into the slides before class, see who needs a little bit of help or who's dropped off the radar, who's struggling, and to use students that were doing very well and to show their slides to the class of what was a good result for their work for the week. The only tip I would say, a good tip, is when you set up your slides, you get a link, as I said, for each set that you set up. Create an Excel sheet. It's very, very useful to keep track of all the links in one place, so that if for some reason you need to go back and find that link for students that weren't there, you have it in the one place and it's just easy to reuse it and resend it. So overall, I would say we are a big fan in our school of the slides. We would, for gathering information into one place of students learning. Overall, it's more positive than negative. The biggest negative is it does take time to get it set up at the weekends, which we did for the coming week.
Very good.
So I hope that is of use and that you find it helpful in some way.
Mary, that's of huge use, Mary, and thanks for explaining it so clearly. And I think the visual that you've given here on your slides actually shows the approach students take as well, because like you have in a normal slideshow, you can see that you've got group 1 in blue, group green and group 2 in green, group 3 in yellow, and group 4 in the orange gold color there as well. So I think it's a very neat way of using either, PowerPoint slides, PowerPoint presentation, or even the Google slides, because I think the same function applies there as well. So that's really strong. Mary, the two things that stood out for me, I loved in what you picked out in your advantages. Students can see and learn from each other's slides. Okay, so sometimes we consider assessment as something that's there to catch students out. But here it's, the main purpose of assessment at junior cycle is to support student learning. So the approach that you took to gathering evidence of student learning was hugely beneficial. And I think that was one of the standout features you mentioned there at the very start. I was surprised by how effective and motivating it was for them to see each other, and they were very good in helping each other to sort out what they had got wrong. One of them, Mary, I think you're spot on. I love this one as well, because sometimes we ask students to enter their feedback via Microsoft Forms or Google Forms, but once they press that submit button, they can't go back to it. So I think a lot of the learning that's there, they could actually see what they'd written, they could see it in comparison to others, and they could see it in the context of your feedback to everybody as well, and they could alter it. So there was a chance to actually progress and move on and go back and change. And I loved how you alluded to that there as we went along. And I think you mentioned the risk factor, what is it? They're warned to within an inch of their lives that if they touch anyone of the slides, they'll be thrown out of the group. But what I think you had it there, instead of actually interfering with peers' slides, I bet you found that they were actually helping each other to, if a student couldn't write up and another student had access, it wasn't just you that was writing it up, they're actually supporting each other to write it up.
That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Some students on their phones couldn't access it, and their friends would say in class, I can access it, can I write on their slide? So they were really, really good at working together. It was great to see it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. That builds on the really good nature. Whenever students feel, as you said there, part of something bigger, part of a community, you'll always have that. So Mary, I hope that you put your feet up now and enjoy the rest of the presentation. And I want to say thanks very much for such a detailed presentation and for your time in preparing it.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Great. I'm just going to draw across Mary's column in her Padlet, because she shared with me, I just posted them for her here, and I'll just drag it up a small bit. How to create a shared presentation, how to share it. Sorry, now I just want to scroll that down if I can. It may be just frozen on me here. Oh, here we go. How to share it. She used the Athletics Ireland Run for Fun, so she mentioned that, and that's included here. And she also mentioned the HSC Activate Diary, and that's included as well. And I know that there's a few more resources. If you have any resources that you think would support Mary, or if you have any feedback for her, please feel free to comment on her column here. It's the fourth column across, column A, Mary Nealon. So Mary, thanks very much for that. So you might want to take a few notes, maybe write down a few notes, because I don't think you want to interact with Mary's Padlet right now, because I know that you might want to listen to what Fabienne has to say. So we're going to go across from Dublin to Galway. Actually, between Dublin and Galway, I think Galway are the only county here that haven't engaged in collective training so far this year. So Fabienne is definitely the odd one out. So Fabienne, I'm going to hand over to you here. And I think, Fabienne, you might want to share slides yourself if I'm right. So if you want to share your screen there, you can automatically knock mine out. And I might need to stop share just for a moment. So just bear with us. So, John, will I stop share for a second, Fabienne, and you see how you get on there? Okay. And we can revert back if necessary.
Does that work there now?
Yeah, it's coming through now, Fabienne. That's ideal. Thank you.
Great. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Fabienne Cooney, and I'm a teacher in Coláiste in County Galway. So our students showcase their evidence of learning through Microsoft Teams and OneNote. And this allows the experience to be manageable for everyone. So it's all in one space and very accessible and meaningful in the sense that it allows for scaffolding. So here you can see just a small snapshot of our junior cycle PE program. So in first year, we explore learning outcomes relating to gymnastics with an emphasis on creativity, teamwork, and fitness. So this forms the basis for second and third year. Basically, it's an introduction for their CBAs in second year and third year, and it gets them into the process of reflection. So as I've said, we use OneNote to allow students to show evidence of their learning before, during, and after the. So it may be 6 weeks generally is, but if you need to take more time, we do. So that it just makes it more manageable for students. So before the unit, we'd use OneNote to provide clarity about the strand. It stimulates interest and ownership, and students can add their own suggestions as well. During then, we would view, reflect, and refine their work. They can provide feedback to others and plan as a team. And afterwards, they will reflect and report on their final performance, and this forms the basis then for their CBA grade. So we share the learning intentions with the students from the start through Microsoft Teams, as well as information regarding how they can show their learning over the course of the unit. So for us, it's important to stimulate interest for those with little interest in gymnastics. So we would post some images that relate to the need for flexibility, bodily control, and movement skills in sport and everyday life. So we ask students to post images of other ways they can identify with this. So it just gives a nice platform to refer to when the class begins. So in class then, we would discuss the relevance and importance of being able to move and control our bodies in different ways. And then we try to relate to something topical in the media. So TG Cahir each weekend have been shown the women's AFL. So we'd kind of refer to that, how flexibility and strength and control is really important for that particular sport. So these are some screenshots of group sequences from last year. So we would show the students examples of performances from the previous year, and also would bring in some TYs to perform a live sequence. So there could be a sister or a brother, a cousin or a friend in the class. They to see them perform. So it creates a bit of excitement for them and generates a nice atmosphere for creativity. So through OneNote then, we can add a host of resources here, so they can draw on them to help them throughout their journey. So students can share more ideas with each other through the collaboration space. So we found that very useful. So it's a place where they can keep everything together, and it might be useful to look back at if they choose to do LCP in the future as well. So here then is just a timeline of what our strand has looked like. So in weeks 1 and 2, we reintroduce the skills they would have learned in first year, and they start deciding what individual elements they want to showcase in their final routine. So they get to attempt individual and group balances to see which ones will be most appropriate for the group. Now, obviously this year it'll be a little bit different because it's going to be more individual, but it still doesn't mean that the experience will be any less meaningful for them. So they have tasks to complete each week then in their Microsoft team. So it makes the workload for each PE class much more manageable for students and the teacher. So the evidence of learning starts to build up. So I would link with the SPHE theme, so importance of physical health. So PE tasks can be completed during SPHE as well, and they get to share their journey with their SPHE tutor. And it actually gives an opportunity for the tutor and the class to create a collage of their journey at the end. And it's something then that the students have for like their graduation memories and things like that. So this is an example of one of the tasks that they can do. So we try to broaden their horizons a bit, as sometimes their focus can be very narrow, and it's this way it encourages some more creativity. So weeks 3 and 4, then the routines start to take shape, and they use their device to record their performances so that they can start to analyse what they have done so far and work on improving it. So they can look back and reflect on their performances during SPHE, so it's a bit of video analysis for them. They can decide on a group captain as well. So the group captain is responsible for bringing the device to class to record the sequence. So you'll only need 5 or 6 devices in the class rather than everybody bringing their device. So again, through OneNote, you can add a whole host of resources for the students so that during class they can look back on and keep challenging themselves. So here is just some more examples of tasks that they can do at home or in SPHE class to record evidence of their learning throughout their journey. So depending on how well the groups are working, you might get to start this process in week 4, and if not, then in week 5. So they will assess themselves and one other group and make the necessary changes in preparation for their final performance. So the descriptions that you see here would be created at the start with the class and can be amended throughout the strand, and they can simply tick these off using the traffic light system. So in week 6 then, you have their final performance and final reflection. And in the final reflection, we would give students a choice of answering 5 out of 7 questions to reflect on their experience. So they're able to choose what format this is submitted in. So as with most PE class, there's a huge mix of abilities, all with different goals. So we try to give a choice and option to cater for all. So they could submit their reflection through text, video, or audio file. So just to summarise, this platform provides opportunities for students to gather evidence of their learning along their 6-week journey, and it provides support for students in a meaningful and manageable way.
Fabienne, thank you so much for your contribution there, and I see on your summary slide there, and you might just leave that there for just 1 second. I really liked how you're using the evidence, and I hope people can, you can. I hope, yeah, you can really see how you're using the evidence you're gathering at the various stages in a very meaningful way. So at the start, you know, when you were building on their prior interests that they had, you were using that very much to provide clarity. and see what they might have taken from their experience in first year or second year. But as it went along then, the types of evidence you were gathering was just to support learning. And it hopefully made what was happening in class each week even more purposeful and meaningful because of the types of activities they were doing between classes. And I really liked the very end as well, because you had gathered evidence of their work, especially in the format of maybe their final reflection, and maybe a video of their final reflection as well. Not only does that allow you to make a judgment, but it also, like, the primary purpose of that video evidence is to allow students to reflect on their own piece and to be proud of their own piece. So I really liked your idea of a portfolio that they could look back to in second year graduation or third year graduation. So Fabienne, thanks very much. Is there anything, Fabienne, that you'd like to add?
No, I suppose it helps the students to take responsibility and ownership of their journey as well. So that's what we found really helpful.
And once you set the task, and you can unshare, actually I'll reshare here again. Once you do,
yeah, I can stop share here now.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to pick up mine here, hopefully. So Fabienne, thanks so much for leading that. I just want to make sure that you can all see my screens there. So Fabienne, can you just confirm that you can?
Yeah, I can.
Great. So look, thanks very much for that. Now, I'm just going to do something that, well, Fabienne, I didn't intend to do this, but I want to just gather evidence of what people are sharing from around here. So in the spirit of gathering evidence, these are 2 or 3 comments that came back for Pauline. They come into us as panelists and presenters here. But I really like this from, I think it was Pauline that said it there. This is the most realistic presentation, and this is down to Mary, I've enjoyed on JCT webinars that relate to my school. I can totally relate to it. Excellent detail, especially for us non-techno teachers. I have the same issue of information return on lots of different platforms, and she's looking forward to using, I think it was the Microsoft PowerPoint or Google Slides to use it. So Pauline, I don't have your surname there, but I could check it, but thanks very much for that contribution. Gormla, I know Gormla because I met her a few weeks ago online. Thanks, Mary, for your clear and helpful presentation. And Anna from Kerry, well done, Mary, super work completed and great presentation. So again, that sense of community by having an online artifact like we have today in real time is extremely helpful as well. So I just want to thank Fabienne and Mary before her for their contribution there. I'm going to, before we turn to Doireann, I'm actually going to look to a small bit of engagement, okay? Because we looked at manageability in terms of Mary's approach and Fabienne's approach to date. So the question I'm posing here is, during this last school term, what steps will you take to keep the process of gathering evidence of learning manageable for students and teachers? So how do we keep it as manageable as possible? And, you know, you can reflect on Mary or Fabienne's pieces, or you can give your own suggestions as to how you would do that. So that's on column, the 3rd column, I think. I'll just bring it across here, of our Padlet. And thanks, Anya. I can see that she shared the Padlet link in the chat again for those that might not have it open. So maybe in the 3rd column, we'll just give it 1 or 2 minutes there. And then we'll have a quick scan of a few of the responses just following that. Great. So as you're completing it, I'm going to take a scan of a few of them. And I think that if we looked at this, if we presented this column last year compared to now, I don't think we'd be in the same place at all because of the skill set that the online teaching and learning has brought about in us and in our students in terms of using combinations. So Martin, good to see you joining us from Dublin there, Martin. A use of a combination of worksheet, video and PowerPoints. I think maybe allowing students to capture their worksheets. Like I loved how Mary, I think, had allowed them to take a picture and share that in the PowerPoint as well. It was a really neat one. Using Microsoft Team assignments after setting up the P team made it easier to see the whole class engagement. Very strong. If that teacher there that has that has a link to how you do that, please add it in your comment or share that as well. It would be very helpful. Teams in OneNote are very good for recording. Yes. So thanks again, Martin. This kind of data. So it's OneNote and Teams are a very strong way of doing it. Google Classroom, using OneNote, that might be Sinead Carr, I think there. Keeping a record of all participation in assessments and feedback online for the students to access at any way. Access anytime is a great way of continuing the gathering of evidence. So thanks very much for that. I'll just scroll down one more there. Using P-journals, flashcards and self-evaluation. So guys, thanks very much for that. I'm going to scroll back up. Great. So I'm going to hand over here to our final presenter. The time, as it has always done, is kind of slipping by us. We're just coming up to 6 o'clock. But Doireann, please do take your time as you work through this. And I think we'll have we'll extend the time. There's no problem left or right there. So Doireann, I might hand over to you if you're happy to present from your machine as well. So I'll just unshare for a second. And Doireann, can you come in there?
I am, yeah, I'm here.
Great. And you might want to share your screen, Doireann, if you're happy to do so.
I will now.
And if there's any problem, I can take back control again here if you so wish.
Should be all good now. I'll just find the right button. Here we go.
Great, Doireann, that's just coming up now.
Right.
Lovely. Off you go, so Doireann.
Okay, so my name is Mhuimhneacháin. I'm from Coláiste, Coláiste, Choilm in Ballincollig. Similar to Mary, we are a 1,400 student school, so we've a large school, and I'm involved with junior cycle PE in the school. So what I'm going to speak about today is obviously gathering evidence and making it as manageable and measurable as possible through athletics. I'll be speaking mostly towards first years with the group that I have at the moment, and how I tried to gather as much evidence as possible in a manageable way for me, so that I could keep on top of everything and make it useful for me when I moved to my next lesson, or even if I wanted to take the information that I gathered and learned from them to my next classes in the future, as well as helping guide them through their first assessment in physical education in second level school, because we started with athletics. I will be looking at firstly collecting prior knowledge before the unit began and seeing their interests, and then speaking towards the lessons and what I did before and after the midway assessment and the final assessment. We use Google Classroom in Coláiste Choilm to send information to the students, and so once everybody is logged in, we can put videos, YouTube clips, use Google Forms and Google Docs to get the information from the students, and also to give it to them in a really simple and easy to follow way. Some of them are very computer literate when it comes to social media, but when it comes to Google Classroom, they find it difficult sometimes to understand what it is that we're asking from them. So using Google Forms and really laying things out and using Mentimeter and apps like that can really get them to engage and use it in a meaningful way. Using Google Classroom allows me to give them information and prepare them for the lesson prior to them coming into it, and giving them that understanding of this is what's going to go on today inside in the class. So that when they go in, they're like, okay, I know that today that this is what we're doing, and based on the work that I did myself at home, I have information that I can now bring to the class and share with the class, and get a sense of achievement out of being able to bring that information forward. When I started the athletics unit with the first years, we had obviously our first class of meet and greet and getting them logged into Google Classroom so that they could use it. And then I explained that we would be undertaking an athletics unit. So when I uploaded the work, the first thing I wanted to know was, what do they know about athletics? Had some of them maybe participated in it in primary school? And so I set up this activity to kind of do like a reading comprehension, just to see what they might know. And also when it comes to connecting like the image to athletic events, if they have absolutely no knowledge of it whatsoever and they've never looked up the athletics or the Olympics or anything. It means that they can then use Google to prepare themselves before they go into class. So when I pose the question, so guys, what athletic events do you know of, or have you heard of or seen? Nobody's left thinking, well, I don't know anything. They can say, oh, I remember because I looked this up, or as part of the work that I did in preparation for coming into the class today. Participation is also really important information for me when I go in. It means that I know, using this Google form, I ask, like, have you ever participated in athletics? If yes, what events? So I know if I need somebody for an example for the sprint, I can say, oh, Johnny, did you ever do the sprint before? Because just in case, you know, he doesn't want to put himself forward on the spot. Johnny, did I hear that you did sprint before, or you did athletics before? Would you be willing to give us an example? And that means that I have a kind of a knowledge beforehand, and he's also put himself forward, or can step back from it if he'd like. And the final one, what athletic events would you like to try? So I really find that the students appreciate being given the options, and it kind of makes them excited about what they're going to do inside in class. What happened before was the students came in and they were really excited. One or two of them had actually looked up some of the events before, and they were like, oh, I'm so excited to try discus. Do you see how far they can throw it, or how are we going to be able to hold that thing? And it just means that there's kind of a build up of excitement, and they feel a sense of ownership over what they're going to be doing during the unit. The last bit is I wonder, or an interesting fact. So I tend to pose a question to get them thinking, so that they might have an answer when they come into the class, something a bit different. But the interesting fact is actually one of the ones that they really, really love. And one of the best ones I think that I got for the Olympics was that two Japanese pole vaulters drew second and third, and that they cut the two medals in half and they melded them. So they had a half bronze, half silver medal. And that was just really interesting. And it showed that they had gone to the effort of gathering that information themselves and then bringing it to the class. So it was very meaningful, because it meant that they had gone outside of my kind of classroom and made the effort to look into it. When it gets to the lesson, when I specify, like, okay, so next week we're going to be doing the sprint, and I'll set up the work for them. One of the things that kind of tends to happen when I set the question, like, what's the current record time? Take a guess. And so the issue can sometimes be that they Google it. And at the start, it was like, oh, sure, obviously they're all going to go look it up, and it's not going to have any excitement when it comes to the lesson and we get to discover what it is. But then after thinking about it, I said, sure, look, if they do look it up, it means that they've actually gone to the effort of looking it up. And it may even mean that they've gone to the YouTube page and they've opened the YouTube page, and they might even have watched the race. So in the end, it wasn't a downfall, but it ended up being something that may lead to further exploration of themselves within it, which can be meaningful, meaning that they've looked at it, they've watched it, they might have seen the race. So when they come into class, they can talk about it. The next bit is gathering vocabulary and an understanding about the sprint before they come in, so that we can then create criteria for success when we're inside. So this video here is just a really slow motion sprint of an athlete in the Olympics, and it breaks down really slowly and specifies like particular aspects. And then using the Mentimeter, the students can put in 3 elements that they saw. Oh, I saw that his back was very straight. He was looking straight forwards. He wasn't checking over his shoulders. His knees were up really high, or different things like that. And this is really visual. And we're very lucky in Coláiste Choilm that we have a PowerPoint presentation. We have a projector, excuse me. We have a projector inside in the school. So that means that when it comes to discussing this, I can put up the word cloud from the Mentimeter, and from that, after watching the video, we can create our success criteria together inside in class, which then feeds into them owning that vocabulary and bringing it forward into feedback later on, and then again later on into their own reflection that they helped create it, so that they have a sense of understanding when it comes to it. Now, once that's all done, at the beginning of class, I say, this is what you're going to learn, and this is what we're hoping you're going to learn today. And once that's all done, it's not just, right, we did the sprint today, park it and leave it go. We want the experience to be meaningful to them and not feel that it's gone afterwards, that they've learned something that they can then can be assessed afterwards. They get a sense of achievement of being able to answer the questions. So what knowledge have they acquired within the class? So we have here a video of students who are, well, not students, but 15-year-olds who are undertaking a sprint in New South Wales, I think it is. But it was really effective because at the beginning it shows that one of the athletes had a false start. So that brings in the question of, did they learn the rules? Can they identify this? And then I gather that evidence and I can see, okay, maybe I didn't specify that enough inside in class. Maybe I need to make the rules more clear, or I need to check afterwards that they remember that vocabulary. So that evidence then informs my teaching, but it also gives them a sense, if they can answer it, well, hey, look at me, I understand this and I can point it out and I can actually analyze this video. Give 3 elements of the technique for the student in yellow. So the person in yellow wins, and they obviously think, well, if I can get them to connect technique to winning, it might mean that they then will focus more on seeing, oh, well, if I have good technique, it'll help me to maybe win races. So connecting the importance of good technique, and then pick one player and give them advice. And that ties back into using the success criteria, the vocabulary from the success criteria, in a way that they can then make other people understand it, or that they can put that information across to other people. So the evidence of learning at halfway through, this was something that they really, really loved, was the replay it, which is 4 separate images. I just set up my computer on a desk, which I bring out with me. It doesn't fit in the pitch normally, but I just make sure the computer is nice and charged. And so there's 4 different screens and each has a delay. So image 1 is in real time, image 2 is 2 seconds later, image 3 is 4 seconds later, and image 4 is like 5 seconds later. And it just means that it's really quick moving, that the students come up in pairs, they have their success criteria that they've made, they get 3 attempts, and what they do is they'll perform, they'll turn. So they're obviously not going to get the real-time version, but then they can check off their success criteria. If they miss it in the second video image, they can go to the third, they might see it in the third, and they can move on to the fourth. And then when they have seen that, they can tick it off themselves, they're analyzing themselves, they can speak to a partner about it, and it kind of moves them into that area of, okay, so this is what I need to work on. I can see it, I can figure out what I need to do. And that's meaningful because when it moves on later to their final assessment, they can think back to, oh, I remember halfway through when I did the mid-assessment, I never brought my knees up, or I never landed on the ball of my feet. My feet were a bit flat. So now that's something I can remember from my final assessment. Here, I find that, especially with first years, they can find it quite challenging to give constructive feedback as opposed to, oh, you did very well, that was very good. And by structuring it, it kind of helps them to bring forth that information in a way that's maybe not natural at the beginning, but can guide them towards what would be a positive form of constructive feedback. And the blanks then are still information that they've brought forward because it's the success criteria that we gathered together. So your sprint was good because you, and then put in, you brought your knees up, or because your back was straight, or because your arms weren't crossing your body. It would be better if you, and then they can put in the next bit of criteria that they feel would help the student become better. It also takes out that section of, oh, you're judging me. It's like, no, I'm following the feedback structure that's been given to me, so you'll be doing the same, so we're all on the same par. Now, the analysis of your performance was very important because they had a discussion about it, and you could video it at the end of the midway assessment. Say, right, so Johnny, tell me, what is it that you feel you learned from today? What are you going to bring forward into your final assessment? And that's very meaningful, and it's manageable for me too, because the video only takes a few seconds. They get through it really quickly. They make out their points as to what they want to work on, and then they're moving on. It's really quick, 1, 2, 3, and they go quickly through the video. And it means that I have something tangible afterwards to go back to when I'm doing my final assessment or to preparing my comment. when it comes to the final assessment, at the beginning, they have been told, we are working towards a whole class Olympic event, and you are going to get to pick what event that you want to perform in. You'll be put into a team, and your team gets to choose a country you're going to represent. And we move towards that culminating event with a sense of excitement. When it comes to preparing for it, we look at kind of preparing their mental game. And with first years, they're just new to all of this, and it's really nice to kind of show them somebody that they might be able to identify, which is Usain Bolt. And here he gives a really brief explanation as to what he thinks a champion is. And so through those questions, they can get advice from somebody who's a world-class athlete and listen into what he thinks, but they can also start to develop their own sense of, what do I think makes a champion, and what am I going to do so that I can do the best that I can? And it gives you a sense of understanding about how they're preparing. Do they understand what's involved? What have they learned in preparing for it? And then in class, when they come in, they get the opportunity to practice, get themselves all set up. You have this long now to practice, and then we'll move into the assessment. We record it, and then they get to watch back the recording prior to going to write their reflection. And that's something that they really appreciated and was mentioned in a number of their reflections. I saw in my video, or I saw in my performance that, and they could link that in then when they were using the vocab for the success criteria. So again, it was manageable because we had an iPad at each station, which we're very lucky to have. So it meant that they could look back over it after their performance before we moved to do our reflection. And it was also fun because they were working in groups, and they had, go was Australia or whatever country that they were representing. And there was a sense of community within that too. The reflection, then they were given the option whether they wanted to do a recorded or a written, and we went to a computer room. We were able to do it all together inside, and they could pass on the iPad if they wanted to look back over what they had done. But very few of them chose to do a voice recording. They felt that they could articulate themselves better in writing in the end. But again, offering that option could mean something to someone in the end, that they feel like, no, do you know what, it would work better for me. The sentences that I provided for them were kind of open sentences. I felt that I did this very well because and always saying, what's the why? What's the why? What's the why? And getting them to kind of become more in depth in their analysis as much as you can when they're just fresh into the school and they're getting used to things. This is an example of one of the first year's reflections. Again, understanding that this is their first time reflecting, their first time trying to be critical of their performance, and their first time reviewing footage after their assessment. So we had, what worked well was, this person had done shot put, just to make you aware. What worked well was shifting my weight from my back foot to my front foot so I got more power for my throw or push. What I found challenging was trying to keep my elbow parallel to the ground. And then I brought in the wellbeing indicators. They got to choose which one, and he went with active because I was doing exercise beforehand. So that brings to me the information that, okay, so when he was thinking about his assessment, he was actually preparing himself at home. That work that we did in class was meaningful because he brought it outside of school as well. And it also helped inform my judgment later on. So I wouldn't pull a muscle, and understanding there, and because I was in PE. Given. So all of this then led to a comment which I gave to the student themselves when I was speaking to him, but also when I got to Christmas, I was able to go onto VSware and give really great feedback to the student and to the parent through the VSware format. Now, these are short because we have a very limited number of characters that we can use when we are giving the information or sending it home. So I tried to be as succinct as possible. But the evidence that I used to inform this was the video analysis that I did myself when watching their performance, the students' reflection, and then my observation of how they got on over the course of the 6-week block that we did. The student was from the Coláiste, but was working in a mixed group. So that's why their reflection was in English, but my feedback is in Irish. I broke it down into those 3 sections when I was giving the feedback. I used I tried to include the video in the first sentence saying that their technique, that very good technique was to be seen, which had been explained to him when I was speaking to him. This is what this is what you did that made it good. And then brought on the reflection. His reflection was very clear on his ability and able to say, because you said my elbow was parallel, you were able to recognize the benefit of having your elbow parallel to the ground. You were able to recognize that you hadn't done that. So that's really clear to me. It's clear that you understand what you were doing within the activity. And then finally onto observation, which for me, I wanted to tie back into well-being and all of the evidence that I gathered through the work that he had uploaded to me through Google Forms, the information that he had given me inside in class based on the prompts that were given to him before he came in, and also on his participation as a student within the class and how he interacted with those when he was giving feedback and helping his partners. In the end, when it all comes down to it, I felt that using these approaches and taking that time before class to prepare the students for in-class activities was really effective. It meant that there was really meaningful learning for the students, because I could see, well, Johnny definitely watched the video of the slow-mo, because I can see that he's talking to other people about, oh, you know, the way that the knees are high in here, and you can see him thinking about it when he's performing. And it was manageable too, because it meant that when it came down to it, I was able to look at this information that I was given. There was only 3 questions laid out to them each week, so they knew what was expected. And then it wasn't a massive load for me to try and go through to get a sense of their understanding and what they were learning. So the oral feedback that I was able to give to the student then was based on all the information that I had gathered. So I could say, this was really good and this was really good, and be very specific in the feedback that I gave to that child based on the work that they had done and the information that they had given me. And also this would be able to inform the next unit that I have with them, and an understanding of how they gather that information themselves, and what expectation they have from me when giving feedback or when asking them to participate in class. So the online platforms really helped, because it meant that, again, similar to Mary, that everything was all in one place. I wasn't looking for it here, there, and everywhere. It all tied back in, and the YouTube videos were really short. I tried to keep them short so that the students would get interesting information as quickly as possible, so they didn't feel like they were sitting there for ages going through it. In the end, it led to really interesting reflections about their experience in gathering that information and answering the questions and coming into class and understanding what they were going to be doing. And it kind of helped for me. My understanding of it was that they were prepared coming into the class. They knew what was expected of them. They were able to produce that information. They felt that it was of value, because they were being able to go afterwards to check what they had learned and know that they had learned something coming out of the class. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that was helpful.
Doireann, thank you so much for that. I'm going to just reshare my screen again if I can, and hopefully that should come through for you now in a second. Doireann, thank you so much for that. I think you had a lovely way of catching what exactly happened and how you interacted it very closely with the class. I'm going to make a reference to a few things there, and I'm just going to build on it in just a second. There were 2 things that came in. So Fiona McCall in Coatford, Fiona, thanks so much. Thank you, great presentation. And Emma McCormack. Emma, is Replay It an app? That was an app that Doireann mentioned in her presentation. So Emma, we shared a link to you there, and it's also available in the App Store. But what I have done, or what the team have done here, is under Doireann's contribution, Doireann mentioned about 3 videos, I'd say. She mentioned Mentimeter, she mentioned Replay It, but she mentioned the stimulus videos. So we've got the stimulus video 1 here, which was the sprint with a false start. The stimulus video 2, which was Usain Bolt's Elements of a Champion. And then the sprint form slow-mo as well. But we also added there, just for Emma's benefit, the Replay It app, how it can be downloaded as well. Okay, so hopefully, Emma, that's of support for you there. Okay, it's going to come to the close there. Terry, thanks so much for the feedback there as well. Interesting presentations and useful in the times that we're in. So Terry, thanks for that feedback. There are 2 further examples in written format from Anna and Niamh. And you might remember Anna and Niamh from our previous webinar, which was looking at goal setting and supporting student reflection. So I might ask Anya, maybe just to drop in that link to that booklet again, because it's got a good run through of Anna and Niamh. And it's good to view that in terms of their contributions at the last time as well, because Anna, I know, was focusing very much on the Strand 1 classroom-based assessment, and Niamh, to the best of my knowledge, is focusing on athletics as well, in the context of her sharing. It is the athletics. So I want to thank Niamh and Anna for following up with that as well. They made a lot of reference to the support booklet for our last CPD in-service, our last CPD support. And this particular one looked at goal setting and reflection. And it had a lot of reflective questions about the time in lockdown. So I think they'd be very useful, and it was looked at through the lens of the wellbeing indicators. There was also reflecting on a personal physical activity program at the start, at the midway point, and at the end. And I think some of Darren's questions really link to that as well, in terms of what progress has been made and what might your next steps be. I know Darren mentioned STEM sentences as well. So this particular booklet, Supporting Student Goal Setting and Reflection, has some great ideas about how to allow students to, how to pose questions. And then of course they can respond either in the written format, or as we saw from both Fabienne and Darren, in the audio or in the video format. They can record their reflection, because sometimes it's much easier to express yourself in the oral way rather than in the written way. So just again, just bring links to these, but I'm not going to dwell on. I think that Darren's pieces of athletics or video clips really stimulated students' interests. And I think she was providing lovely vignettes of how they might respond in class and how she might build on it, you know, looking for the why. And then I loved Mary's piece about having a safe collaborative space where they can actually interact, see what each other's work is, and build from there and support each other's learning. And I'm just going to look to the last piece here. I think all of the teachers looked at, Fabienne, for example, mentioned the digital portfolio that she was using via OneNote. And then, of course, using online platforms to facilitate peer assessment and collaboration. And Mary Nealon's piece, you could easily bring in a nice feedback loop where students have to comment or provide feedback based on criteria to another student as well. I thought that we've looked at this over the last number of years, but it has become, it's just very evident. I think that all the teachers here tonight were trying to get as much clarity as possible so that students could actually take a lot of ownership of their own learning, because without that, it will fall. They were developing discussions or tasks or activities that elicited evidence of learning. I love Darren's midway assessment with the app that we just mentioned a second ago, with the Replay It app. That's evidence. And if students are looking at evidence, then they can respond to it and generate even further evidence in terms of their reflection. And by doing these two things, students are provided with feedback, either themselves through reflection, from their peers through peer assessment, or via the teacher through teacher feedback. They're resources for each other, and they own their own learning. So I think those are probably the key points about using evidence of learning, because it impacts so much on all of the other aspects of formative assessment. So we're coming to the end. I hope that has given a good look at the support documents that are available to us, and they're all in your support booklet. The arrangements for our current third years and how we might report on them at a school level this year, and equally for our second years and first years. And I do want to thank the teachers for sharing their approaches to gathering evidence of student learning that might support us in the longer term. As we close the session, I will be asking people maybe to respond in the last column here. The benefit of this particular session piece is that, for example, Terry Butler might have spotted something that another teacher mightn't have. So we could have a really nice list of maybe the 20 or 30 strongest things that emanated from today's session that you could build on. And feel free to share to yourselves. And Martin, thanks for Martin Quinn for taking the leading role on contributing to that. Martin, I might pull you back from it just while I finish off the last two slides, and I might ask you then to contribute to that at the end. So looking at our presentation, there are two quick updates I'd like to inform you about. The Physical Education Association of Ireland released a newsletter just ahead of the of the Easter break, and that can be accessed at peai.org. The PE Expo are having an online PE Expo this year. So online there, you've got Paddy O'Reilly's details, and more information can be caught at peexpo.ie also. And one other thing from the PEI, they're releasing a number of podcasts later this term. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the focus of those podcasts as well. So there are 2 updates. And one last one, I see teachers such as Mary Jo Bowler here from Claregalway. Mary Jo, we've got a special webinar, a special event for teachers that might be teaching in Coláiste, no in na Honid Long Gaeilge, or teaching in a Struth Long Gaeilge. There's a webinar next Wednesday, tomorrow week, and it's called Ag Tacu Lena Chéile Con Fálam sa Corpadachas sa Cohu sa Tréimhse. So like there's a number of teachers that will be presenting, like Beg to Spontasown o Alan Finnegan I Gael Clash Limni o Aoife Nash I Gunti Dunanol, August Thomas Constantine from Coláiste Coislifa I Maya Clia Freshen. So that webinar is taking place next Wednesday, and I'll circulate more information around that, but it will be really interesting for teachers that are teaching in Gael Coláiste or through the medium of Irish in Honid Gaeilge known as Struthana Long Gaeilge. So with that, the mailing list is there, and I'll follow up as normal on that. So encourage your colleagues maybe to follow in there. But on behalf of on behalf of me, and the team, I want to thank you sincerely for joining us tonight. I want to give a sincere thanks to our presenters, and for Neil and for Anna that contributed to our booklet also. And I want to thank Anya Farrelly in the hot chair as well, in the Cavan call centre, for responding so well to the questions and answers as we went along there. Martin Quinn has just said that the closing date for P Expo is the 16th of April. So it's a very, it's a short period of time between now and then. So thanks very much, Martin, for feeding back there. So I'm going to stay online for the next few minutes. If anybody has any questions, please pose them in the questions or chat. I would like Anna and like Martin, maybe highlight in the last column of the Padlet, what's the key message you took from today's presentation? That would be exceptionally helpful. And thanks Mary and Sinead for your positive feedback in the chat there as well, and Monica, of course. So guys, that's it. You are free to leave, but me and the panelists are going to stay online in case there's any last questions over the coming while. And Orla Thornton, thanks very much for your feedback there as well. So slán anish de gachéine agus tuaire. Slán anish.